Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. It was a peaceful time in Middle-earth. The great battles had been fought, the darkness vanquished, and the land had begun to heal. But Gandalf, the Grey, now free of his heavy burdens, wandered far from the settled lands of men and hobbits. He felt a calling, a subtle pull that led him deep into the wild places, to the forgotten ruins of ancient times. These places, filled with echoes of past magic, intrigued him, and his curious nature drove him to seek them out. One particular day, as he traversed the misty mountains, a storm rolled in with unnatural speed. The sky darkened, and the wind howled as if warning him to turn back. But Gandalf pressed on, guided by the strange sensation pulling at his thoughts. He knew there was something more than just a storm brewing in the mountains. He had felt it in his bones for days, a disturbance in the fabric of Middle-earth itself. As the storm peaked, Gandalf sought shelter in a narrow cave tucked into the side of the mountain. The entrance was barely visible beneath an overhang of jagged rocks, but something about it felt wrong, too precise, too deliberate. He lit his staff, its familiar glow casting long shadows on the walls as he ventured deeper into the cave. The wind howled outside, but inside, all was unnaturally still. Deeper and deeper he went, until he found himself standing before a stone door, carved with intricate symbols of an age long forgotten. His breath caught as he recognized some of the runes. They spoke of time, of manipulation, and control, ancient magic that predated even the elves. This place was a tomb of sorts, a prison for something too powerful to be allowed free. He knew it was dangerous, but Gandalf's curiosity and sense of duty overpowered his caution. With a muttered incantation, he reached out and touched the stone door. It creaked open with a sound like the sigh of a forgotten god, revealing a small chamber lit by an eerie, ethereal light. In the center of the room, on a simple stone pedestal, rested the object that had called him, a perfectly smooth crystal, no larger than his fist, shimmering with a soft, pulsating glow. It was a time stone, an artifact of such immense power that even Gandalf, with all his wisdom, felt a chill creep up his spine. The time stone was not a mere tool, it was a force unto itself, capable of bending the very fabric of reality. And as Gandalf approached it, he felt the stone's power wash over him like a wave, tugging at the edges of his perception. Time itself seemed to warp around him, moments stretching and contracting in ways that define understanding. He knew he should leave it be, seal the chamber, and let the stone remain hidden for all eternity. But something greater than his own will drove him forward. Perhaps it was fate, or perhaps it was the stone's own influence, but Gandalf reached out and grasped the time stone. The moment his fingers closed around the crystal, the world shifted violently. A blast of energy surged through him, sending ripples of temporal distortion out in all directions. The walls of the chamber seemed to bend and twist, as though the very structure of time was warping around him. For an instant, Gandalf saw everything, past, present, and future, all blending together in a chaotic swirl of images and sensations. Then it was gone, and the world returned to stillness. But Gandalf was not alone. The time stone had awoken something dark, something ancient. He could feel it now, a presence lurking just beyond the edges of his awareness, watching, waiting, and with it came a cold, oppressive force, like a shadow that had been roused from its long slumber. Gandalf knew then that he had unleashed something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. He needed to act quickly, to undo the damage before it spread. But time was already slipping away from him. The stone's power had begun to affect the world outside. He could sense it, ripples of temporal energy distorting the natural flow of time. He had no choice but to use the stone to travel through time itself, to seek out the source of the disturbance and put an end to it before it consumed all of Middle-earth. But doing so would come at a cost. He would have to confront not only the forces he had awoken, but also his own past and future. With a deep breath, Gandalf focused on the stone, letting its energy flow through him. The world around him began to blur and fade, and he felt himself being pulled through the currents of time. Moments passed, and when his vision cleared, he found himself standing in the midst of a great battle, one he knew all too well, the last alliance of elves and men. He was in the past, at the very moment when Sauron was defeated and the One Ring was lost. But something was wrong. The battle was not as it should have been. Time had been altered. He could see it in the way the soldiers moved, their actions disjointed, out of sync with the flow of time. As Gandalf navigated the battlefield, avoiding combatants frozen in mid-motion or moving at impossible speeds, he realized that the disturbances in time had already begun to ripple backward. This moment, this critical event in Middle-earth's history, was being tampered with. And if it was not set right, the entire timeline could unravel. In the midst of the chaos, Gandalf encountered a version of himself, a younger, less burdened by the trials of the ages. This Gandalf, though wise, had not yet faced the trials of Saruman's betrayal, nor the darkness of Sauron's resurgence. He was still hopeful, still full of the belief that all could be set right. "You have broken Barrier me," the younger Gandalf said, eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes," Gandalf replied, a grim smile on his face. "And I have come to warn you of a great danger, one that we must both face." The younger Gandalf looked confused but nodded. Together, they navigated the battlefield, seeking the source of the disturbance. It wasn't long before they found it, a shadowy figure lurking at the edge of the battlefield, watching with cold, calculating eyes. Ulghan, the primordial being who had once sought to control time itself, now freed by the disturbance Gandalf had caused. "You cannot stop what has already begun," Ulghan sneered, his voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "Time is mine to command now." Gandalf felt a chill run down his spine. Ulghan was a creature older than Middle-earth itself, a force that had been banished long ago, his power too dangerous to be left unchecked. And now, with the Time Stone in Gandalf's possession, Ulghan sought to reclaim the power that had been denied to him for so long. But Gandalf knew that he could not defeat Ulghan alone. He would need help, not just from his younger self, but from the future as well. He focused on the stone once more, drawing on its power to pull him further forward in time. The world shifted again, and Gandalf found himself in the future. Middle-earth lay in ruins, the sky dark and twisted, the land scorched and broken, and standing before him was another version of himself, a older, battle-worn, and weary, his once white robes tattered and stained. "You've come too late," the older Gandalf said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Ulghan has already won." The Time Stone, a broken bar, it was too much. "No," Gandalf replied, shaking his head. "We can still stop him. Together, we can set things right." The older Gandalf hesitated, but then nodded. He could see the fire in his younger self's eyes, the determination that had once driven him. And he knew that there was still hope, even in the darkest of times. The three versions of Gandalf, a past, present, and future, united against Ulghan. Together, they faced the ancient being in a final confrontation that would determine the fate of Middle-earth. Ulghan, sensing his defeat, unleashed all his power, warping time itself to create an endless loop, trapping the Gandalfs in a cycle of battle that would never end. But Gandalf, drawing on the wisdom of his future self and the strength of his past, found the flaw in Ulghan's plan. By combining their power, the three Gandalfs were able to shatter the loop and banish Ulghan once more. Exhausted but victorious, Gandalf knew that the Time Stone could not remain in the world. It was too dangerous, too tempting. He traveled back to the moment when he first found the stone, sealing it away in the ancient chamber where it had rested for millennia. And as he stood before the sealed door, Gandalf made a vow. He would protect Middle-earth, not just from the dangers of the present, but from the temptations of the past and the unknowns of the future. Time, after all, was not something to be tampered with lightly. Gandalf stood in the quiet of the cave, the ancient stone door now sealed once more. The flickering light of his staff cast long shadows on the damp walls, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself a breath of relief. The Time Stone was hidden, locked away from the world, and Middle-earth would remain as it should at least for now. But there was no true peace in his heart. The power of the stone had shown him things he could not easily forget. Time itself had shifted beneath his grasp, and the knowledge of what could be, both good and terrible, weighed heavily on his mind. He turned and left the chamber, his footsteps echoing softly as he climbed back through the narrow cave, emerging into the cold, clear air of the misty mountains. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a deep, clear blue, and the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden light across the peaks. For a moment, the beauty of the scene soothed him, but the sense of unease remained. Ulghan's threat had been quelled, but Gandalf knew better than anyone that such evils did not vanish entirely. The ancient being had tasted the power of time, and even in defeat, his essence lingered, waiting for a chance to return. As Gandalf made his way down the mountain, he felt the faint pulse of the time stone in the back of his mind, like an echo of a song that wouldn't quite fade. He tried to push it aside, to let the present moment wash over him, but it clung to him, a reminder of the precarious balance of time. He knew his task wasn't over. The flow of time in Middle-earth had been disrupted, and it would take more than simply hiding the stone to restore order. Days passed as Gandalf traveled across the wilds, visiting places of ancient power, seeking counsel from the few who might understand the disturbances he had caused. Elrond in Rivendell greeted him with a mix of curiosity and concern, sensing something amiss before Gandalf even spoke. The elves, ever attuned to the shifts in the world, had noticed the strange fluctuations in time, though they did not know the cause. "You've stirred something, haven't you, my Thrandur?" Elrond's voice was gentle, though his eyes held the weight of centuries. Gandalf nodded. "I've found something that was never meant to be found. The Time Stonia, an artifact of immense power. It's been hidden for ages, but now that it's been awakened, it's disturbed the natural order." Elrond frowned, his brow furrowing in deep thought. "The Time Stone is a legend, a relic of the elder days. To control time itself. That is a dangerous power, even for one such as you." "It is," Gandalf agreed. "I've sealed it away, but it's not enough. The damage has already been done." Ulghan, an ancient force bound to the stone, was roused by my actions. I was able to defeat him, but his influence lingers. Elrond remained silent for a long moment, considering Gandalf's words. Finally, he spoke. "Time is a delicate thing, my friend. Even the smallest disturbance can ripple across ages. You must tread carefully." "I fear that I may have already altered more than I intended," Gandalf admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "There are fractures in time that I do not know how to mend." Elrond nodded solemnly. "Then perhaps the answer lies not in undoing what has been done, but in guiding time forward. You have the wisdom of the ages, Gandalf. Trust in yourself, and in the natural flow of the world." Gandalf left Rivendell with those words echoing in his mind. The task ahead of him was greater than he had anticipated. He could not simply erase the events that had unfolded, but he could guide them, steer the course of time back to its proper path, and to do so, he would need to face the remnants of Ulghan's influence head-on. The disturbances in time were not isolated to the past. Gandalf could feel the ripples reaching into the future, pulling at the threads of fate in ways that even he struggled to comprehend. The world was subtly shifting, moments bleeding into one another in unnatural ways. Travelers spoke of strange occurrences as seasons out of sync, memories of events that had not yet happened, and shadows that seemed to linger just a little too long. Gandalf followed the trail of these disturbances, tracking the source of the temporal instability to a remote and forgotten part of Middle-earth, a place where few dared to venture. It was a desolate region, a barren wasteland where time itself seemed fractured. As he approached, the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness, and the landscape around him flickered, as though caught between moments. It was here that Ulghan had left his mark, a scar on the fabric of time itself. The primordial being had been banished, but his essence remained, feeding off the energy of the time stone, warping reality in subtle but dangerous ways. And as Gandalf stood at the edge of this desolate place, He knew that the final confrontation was at hand. Drawing on the power of his staff, Gandalf summoned his strength and stepped into the heart of the disturbance. The world around him twisted and bent, and for a moment, he was caught between time as the past, present, and future all colliding in a dizzying swirl of memories and visions. He saw fleeting glimpses of himself at different points in his life via walking the lands of men, battling the forces of darkness, standing alone at the end of all things. But through it all, he remained focused, grounding himself in the present. Ulghan's presence was here, but it was weak, scattered across the fragmented moments of time. Gandalf had one chance to set things right. He raised his staff high, its light piercing through the temporal chaos, and with a voice that echoed through the ages, he called out to the ancient power that still clung to life. Ulghan, your time has ended. A great shadow loomed before him, the twisted form of Ulghan emerging from the distortion. His voice, like the grinding of stone, filled the air. You are too late, Gandalf. Time is mine to control. It bends to my will, and you cannot stop what has already begun. But Gandalf stood firm, his staff blazing with the light of ages. You may have tasted the power of time, but you do not understand its true nature. It is not yours to control, nor mine. It belongs to all of Middle-earth, and I will see it restored. With that, Gandalf struck his staff against the ground, unleashing a wave of energy that surged through the fractured time. The land shook, the air crackled, and Ulghan let out a roar of defiance as his form began to unravel, pulled apart by the very forces he sought to control. Gandalf pushed forward, focusing all of his power into the final strike. The light of his staff flared brighter than the sun, and with a deafening crack, the fabric of time snapped back into place. The disturbance was gone, and with it, Ulghan's presence vanished, his essence scattered to the far reaches of existence. Silence fell over the land. The world had returned to its natural state, the flow of time restored. Gandalf stood alone in the stillness, his heart heavy but his spirit unbroken. He had succeeded, but the weight of what he had faced would remain with him always. As he turned to leave, he glanced back at the barren land, now calm and quiet. The Time Stone's influence had been quelled, but its existence was a reminder that even in the most peaceful of times, great power could awaken forces that should remain forgotten. Gandalf made his way back to the familiar lands of Middle-earth, the echoes of his journey still fresh in his mind. He would not speak of the Time Stone or the battle he had fought, for some things were better left unsaid. But he knew that he would carry the memory of it with him always, a silent reminder of the delicate balance that held the world together. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Gandalf walked on, ever vigilant, ever watchful, knowing that time itself was a force not to be taken lightly.